Hey everyone, it's Chrono from the Headphone Show. Today with me I have the Koss Porta Pros. Let's check them out. Alright, so the Porta Pros were introduced by Koss to the personal audio market almost 40 years ago, so in 1984. And since then, they've remained a pretty popular choice amongst listeners because of their sound quality as well as because of their accessible pricing. So depending on where you look, you'll find these anywhere from around $30 to $50, and on sale, you might even find them for cheaper than that. So I would personally consider them as being a pretty affordable set of headphones. Now, in this video, I'll be sharing my experience with the Porta Pros using the stock pads, but also the Yaxi pads, which are an aftermarket set of ear pads that will set you back around $12. So as per usual, we'll start off by talking about accessories. Now, you probably wouldn't expect to get any accessories with a headphone in this price range, but you do actually get one with the Porta Pros, which is a carrying pouch. And I think that this is a nice addition since it should offer at least a little bit of additional protection when on the move. Moving on to build and comfort, the Porta Pros build isn't really all that spectacular. Whilst it does feature a sturdy metal headband and a collapsible design, the Porta Pros ear cups and driver assembly are made pretty much entirely out of plastic that rattles when held in the hands, ultimately making them feel quite cheap. Nonetheless, whilst it may be far from being a headphone that say feels solid, the chassis used on the Porta Pros does an outstanding job at creating a secure and comfortable fit. Additionally, the materials used on this build are extremely lightweight, which makes the headphone incredibly easy to wear for extended periods of time. And whilst the Porta Pros are on-ear headphones, I hardly got any fatigue when using them thanks to how lightly the ear cups actually rested on my ears. There are two more things I'd like to note, however, regarding the Porta Pros comfort, with the first one being that each ear cup has comfort zone sliders, which allow for very slight tension or clamp force adjustments. Then there is the extension mechanism for the headband, which works well once you're wearing the headphones, but it can be a little difficult to adjust, and if you make adjustments once they're on your head, it's highly likely that they'll nab some of your hair in the process. Anyways, let's talk about sound. And whilst the Porta Pros have seen quite a few variations over the years, with some models offering Bluetooth connectivity or, for example, inline remote controls for mobile devices, the core design as well as the neodymium iron-borne drivers powering the Porta Pros have actually pretty much stayed the same since their original introduction. And given how they perform, I think that's a great thing. So let's start off with the bass, and the bass region is where I feel as though Yaxi pads make for the most noticeable sonic change when compared to the original pads. But we'll first talk about how the stock included pads perform, and the bass response on the Porta Pros provides a lot of bass presence by virtue of a very significant mid-bass boost between 100 to 250 Hz, which also slightly makes up for their lack of bass extension and depth. Now, whilst I do appreciate the warmth that this mid-bass emphasis introduces to the mix, I do find that it unfortunately doesn't settle early enough and does intrude into the lower mids, making that upper bass to lower mid transition a little bloated and unclean. Now, when using the Yaxi pads, you still have a pretty similar overall curve to the bass region. You still have that mid-bass emphasis, but what I did notice change when you put these on as opposed to the stock pads is that mid-bass boost is slightly toned down, and more importantly, they seem to somewhat clean up that upper bass area, so I feel as though fundamental tones in the lower mid-range sound less swollen as a result. So if you like really warm, lower registers, I think you'll be perfectly fine with the stock pads. I think you'll find it very enjoyable. But if you prefer a more linear or natural sounding response, then I do think that the Yaxi pads offer a valuable adjustment without the need for any, digital EQ. Then taking a look at the mids, regardless of the pads that I used, I was actually quite impressed with the Porta Pros mid-range voicing. With the exception of the slight upper bass bleed and a tiny bit of 2K nasally timbre that is present with the stock pads, the Porta Pros have a very linear and well-balanced mid-range tuning with well-defined fundamental tones and a present upper mid-range that contours vocals and instrument tones without feeling forward or shouty. As for the highs, I'd say that for the most part, the Porta Pros treble region is pretty laid back and warm sounding. Despite being a little on the darker side though, the treble did feel pretty even and fleshed out, with even more upper treble extension than I would have expected for something in this price bracket. It did seem to me as though there was a slight peak between 5.5 to 6K, but this elevation was not very pronounced or fatiguing. It only introduced some minor glare and sibilance. Overall, it's a relaxed treble tuning, and whilst I doubt that most listeners will be bothered by the subtle lower treble emphasis, I'll mention that it does get sort of smoothed over when using Yaxi pads. Moving on to technical performance, we'll start off with resolution. And for overall image clarity and detail retrieval, I think that the Porta Pros offer the very best performance I've heard in this price bracket. Now, of course, they can't really compete with something like an MMX 100, but for a headphone that's this compact and affordable, they're surprisingly nuanced and clean sounding in their presentation. So I felt that all elements of the music were properly displayed. For soundstage imaging and layering, given that the Porta Pros are a pair of on-ear headphones with very small drivers, you'd probably expect them to not have a particularly spacious soundstage or precise imaging, and you'd be correct. They don't. Nonetheless, I was surprised to hear that the spatial presentation of the Porta Pros feels rather far from claustrophobic. I think that this is mainly due to the fact that they actually have decent layering capabilities, which for the most part kept instrument lines separate and distinct from each other despite having an intimate soundstage, as well as imaging gaps at front left and front right to work with. Last but not least, we have dynamics, and right off the bat, I'll say that when it comes to macro contrast or delivering a sense of punch and slam, the Porta Pros don't provide the most impressive level of performance, which was expected given the fact that it's a small open back headphone. Still, this isn't to say that they don't make for an engaging listening experience, as the mid-bass emphasis does aid the Porta Pros in creating a sort of heightened sense of kick and impact for bass tones. Okay, so now to wrap up this review. After spending the past week listening to the Porta Pros, I think I can see why it's been such a popular headphone for nearly 4 decades. It's truly a charming headphone that delivers a very enjoyable listening experience and one that I think punches way above its weight. So without a doubt, I think that I'm willing to overlook the flimsy build and say that if you're looking for a headphone that can deliver a solid listening experience on the go and is very affordable, then look no further than the Koss Porta Pros. Their open back design means that they're probably not suited for use in an office setting or in crowded places since everyone will hear what you're listening to, but I sincerely can't think of another headphone that I'd actually prefer to wear when moving around a lot or doing anything outdoors, aside from maybe the Apple AirPods Pro. Anyways, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, do consider dropping a like. If you'd like to learn more about the Porta Pros or many other headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the review section available on headphones.com. For more headphone audio content, stay tuned by subscribing to The Headphone Show here on YouTube. And until next time, this is Chrono signing off.